Hi, hello world. My name is Brenda, and I have Aspergers, or I'm an AspieGirl, or a lost girl, one of those girls born before 1980 that kind of fell through the cracks, um, which is something I'll get into a little bit later. But for right now, I know there are many people out there that have videos trying to, you know, state things from the perspective of someone with Asperger's. Um, but we're all unique and we all have our own way of doing things, and we all want to kind of attempt to gain some level of understanding and acceptance in the world. But a couple of things. So this is going to be my introductory video. I've tried to make a couple in the past, and I realized I just wanted it to be organic, and I just wanted to start out saying everything. And what I realized I end up doing is I want to get everything in so fast. I actually have a diagnosis of bipolar 1. First, I want to start out. I don't think that I was misdiagnosed with that. I think part of the problem with that diagnosis is that all my behaviors, we try to fit under that one umbrella, and I always knew that wasn't right, but I couldn't figure out what it was that was wrong. And one of the things is that I now realize this thing that I do is called cluttering. It sounds like pressured speech. So when I'm manic, I talk much faster, and it seems pressured, and it's tangential. The thing is that when I'm manic and I'm talking fast, I'm not tripping over myself. So I'm just talking very, very quickly, and I'm getting all my ideas out at once. The difference is, and I've always known this, and I didn't have the necessary vocabulary or even insight into what was going on to differentiate it for people, is that I would do this other thing when I would usually get nervous in a social situation, or when I would just, my mind would just fill with, like, usually because in the result of me being nervous or excited about an idea, and I'll get into that more about that later. But my mind would literally, the best way to describe it quickly is to say my mind would get either flooded with too many ideas, or it loses. Like, I can feel like tendrils reaching back and trying to find information, and it feels very elusive, and I can't find it. And so what ends up happening is I'm either tripping over myself trying to express all the ideas simultaneously, which is impossible, because they're not occurring in my brain sequentially, and I begin tripping over myself, not wanting to lose one of them, or not being, my brain feels like it's incapable of determining which one is more significant than the other, or which one should occur in a more consecutive, just like logical order. Or the other thing, like I said, I lose my words, so it almost seems like I'm stuttering, or like I have pressured speech, or or my mouth can't keep up with my brain, or my brain is moving too fast for my mouth, and nobody knows what's going on, and I didn't know what was going on. And a lot of times people would think that I was manic when I wasn't, and I knew I wasn't manic, and then I would have to try to consciously slow myself down. But if I started getting excited again or nervous, it would happen again. And I didn't know how to stop this or change this, or sometimes even convince people that their assumptions were incorrect. And that was infinitely frustrating for a really long time. The other thing that would happen is, like I said, so sometimes while my speech is cluttering, I'll actually lose words, and sometimes that will just be a momentary lapse. But more often, so that will happen during the cluttering. But more often than not, what happens is I can't speak at all. Like, I'll lose all my words. I'll lose everything, and this would definitely happen when I would be nervous. But what I realize now is that. And I remember doing this, like, especially at work, where there were meetings that I knew were going to be stressful, because I would try to anticipate all the potential like ways it could play out, and all the people that would be there, and all the things they might say, and what I could say back to them. And I didn't realize that's not what most people do, and it was very exhausting. But if an unanticipated situation arose, I wouldn't know what to say, and a lot of times, especially if I was a high stress situation, I was like, I seemed incapable of coming up with what I was supposed to say back to these people. And it wasn't that I didn't have the knowledge, it was that I realized that, okay, I'm going to give a little background to this. So, in my job, I worked in biotech, and I was good at the technical part of my job, especially, I think, in patterns. So, I really liked looking for discrepancy or trends, and coming up with solutions to problems. And part of it, like, is that I could, some of it happened in my head, but I also liked finding the empirical data to back up what I could seem to see in my head. And it used to always bother me that other people couldn't seem to see what I saw. But I had this theory that people were like asleep, purposely asleep or ignorant, or didn't want to see these things because it didn't fit into their worldview. But I'll get into that in another video. So that part of my job was fine, and I was fine at writing reports or reviewing things or writing all the stuff down in that manner, like an email. But the problem would arose when people always wanted to meet in person. That used to frustrate me, and I used to always say, like, why does everyone have to meet in person? Like, why can't things, this is the technological age, why can't we do everything via email or and not on the phone, because I hate talking on the phone even more so than meeting a lot of times. Like, why can't we just do this way, or like do it through, because they have this like thing called linked or whatever through Microsoft, that I was like, why can't we just do it like over text or over email, or just like read my report, if you have questions, just, send them to me. But no, people always have to meet in person. And it was almost like they could sense my weakness, or that there's something off, and I don't think they always knew what it was. And like, if I even whatever have, like, a lot of times they weren't happy with whatever I was saying, and they would be able to get me maybe they would try to get me to capitulate, but sometimes that wouldn't happen, or I would try to like move it off. But a lot of times I would just sit there, and they would say things to me, and I wouldn't be able to say anything back to them, and I wouldn't. And the thing is, like, they would take it as me just, I don't know what they took it as, because sometimes they would just keep talking, like, they'd be like, "Do you have an answer for me?" And I would be like, and it would sometimes it seemed like they were talking a secret language, and like, it was so confusing to me, and it was frustrating, because I was like, how is it that I'm so smart in these areas and I'm able to do all of this, and then in these other areas I feel so defective, and I don't understand why. And there were all these other things, which I'm going to get into a later videos, and I might touch upon a little bit in this introductory one. So that happened, and that was very frustrating to me, because I didn't know why I was doing that, and everybody just kind of blamed it, like, on my bipolar, and I went along with that. But there's always a part of me, because ever since I was a little girl, I knew I was odd. I used to tell my parents I was a halfling, changeling child, left by, like, the Fae, or like an alien race, and my dad would like tease me and say that, yeah, they cut off the antenna to help me to fit in. And I always felt like my father was the only person who at least somewhat understood me back then. Like, I didn't feel like other girls. I was a total tomboy. Like, I've been reading about other AspieGirls, and I'm finding out a lot of their stories could be my story, and that I was a crazy tomboy when I was little, and I started reading at a very young age, and I was a voracious reader. I just soaked up everything I read, and I remember the women in my family were very scary to me. And I also think this is interesting, that I've been reading similar stories to this also, is that they used to always call me a little dictionary, a little encyclopedia, and they'd get annoyed because I would sit with them and I didn't talk. They either were fascinated, when I was really young, they were fascinated by me. But then as I got older, they got frustrated with me, and they would call me like a little encyclopedia. Like, I would talk about weird things, like I never joined in the conversation the way the other girls did, or talked about the things the other girls wanted to. And I never understood why they were talking about what they were talking about, because it never seemed to serve a function and never seemed, or when they did, sometimes it seemed like it did serve a function, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Like they were talking a secret language, and instead of realizing like they just thought differently than me, I just was very scared of them, and I still am. Like to this day, I feel very uncomfortable around them, and they definitely feel extremely uncomfortable around me, to the point where like they will do things and they won't invite me, and they try to make it seem like okay, example is my on Facebook, my sister was posting that her and my cousin and everything went to Las Vegas to visit my brother and his family and everything like that, and I wasn't there. And of course, like another girl who we grew up with had to come along and point out that I was very glaringly not on that trip, or like on other trips like that, or outings, and I knew it was going to happen, and I decided to do a preempt, and this is before I knew this about myself. I decided to do like a preemptive strike, and state that, I'm not like the others. I always used to want to sit by myself, and I danced to the beat of my own drum. And then my sister wrote back and like something like how she knows how I am, and I made a reference to Golden Child and called her sister Noomsy or whatever. And then she called me and we talked, and she started making up. She's like, you know why we didn't do that, Brenda? And I'm like, yeah, which I really don't, like, but I don't want to say anything I learned a long time ago. It's best not to, act like you care too much. And and then what will happen is she'll start talking to me, and then if I start to bring up anything uncomfortable, one of the things she loves to do is pretend like her kids are talking to her, or something on TV happened, and she'll like interrupt me or whatever, and then all of a sudden she'll say her favorite thing she likes to say to me is, I'll call you back in 10 minutes, and that means I'm probably not going to hear from her for a while. Or the other thing she likes to do, if I call her, even if I don't do it, like the first thing she'll say to me is like, I'm sorry I haven't called you, but when start making, even if I don't even say anything about that, it's like this whole little ritual we have to go through whenever I call her, like explain to me what, and I'm like, I didn't even ask about that. I don't know if that's a common theme with other girls with Aspergers or high functioning autism. I remember when I was a little girl, like I said, I was a tomboy, and they also always said that one of the common themes was that I'm reading is that people call them like the little girls with high functioning autism or Asperger's, and I'm gonna go forward to calling like people like me aliens, and and the neurotypicals, or people that aren't on the autism scale, as earthlings or Terrans, because that would be simpler. So earthlings, especially earthling women, when I would, they would like to call me a little dictionary or a little encyclopedia, and how I worded them out, and they didn't want me to, I didn't always feel comfortable anyway, so it was fine. So like whenever there was like any kind of like familial function, like Christmas or whatever, Thanksgiving, Easter, all the women would hang out together, and I would go hang out with the guys, and they made more sense to me. They just said things directly and talked about things, or like they talked about movies or whatever, things that I feel like I could comment on, and like actually made logical sense in my brain. But I'm starting to realize a lot of things I did when I was little, not just that, were weird, and is also, I'm not going to get into all the stories yet. I kind of wanted this to be just a full introductory, and I want to try to keep it under 30 minutes. But the other thing that I think that is not all. I don't think this happens with all AspieGirls or alien girls or AspieGirls like me. But what ended up happening? So when I was a little girl, I was total tomboy. But then when puberty hit, everything changed. At first, I got my period when I was 10, which was really weird. But what happened after that is nothing came in right. I was very awkward and gangly and weird looking, And all of a sudden the boys that were willing to hang out with me before, like, didn't, and I liked being a loner, so I was fine with that. And I would climb trees with a backpack full of books, especially because my sister used to like to torment me. She's only a year younger than me, 13 months. And she loved tormenting me and just trying to aggravate me. And she hated heights, so I would climb trees in the woods, or I'd go as far as I could in the woods and bring a backpack of books and just get away from the world and be in nature and read and just be in my own little fantasy world in my head. And but then, like, so from the age 10 to 13, I pretty much had no friends at all. And then when I turned 14, all of a sudden everything kind of came into place and I started looking like a girl. But that no way negated anything that came before, or the fact that inside my head, I still very much felt like a little boy. I mean, when I was a little girl, I hated being a girl completely. I wanted to be a boy, and I especially hate because my mom used to always say that boys were better than girls. And my brother didn't have to do chores that me and my sister had to do, and she would get really mad at me because I didn't do chores that well. But I'd be like, "Why doesn't Joe have to do chores?" And she would say, boys don't do chores as well as girls. But then I'm like, I don't do them well. She's like, well, you have to learn how to do them. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. If girls, why not teach them to do them well? Or if I'm not doing a good job, then that. So I used to want to be a boy, and I used to spin around and wish for that appendage down there, and it never happened. But then all of a sudden, I'm 14, and I start looking like a girl. And a weird thing happened where I liked looking like a girl, but in my head, I still felt like a boy. And I felt like there was this weird split that happened. And it's part of the reason why I started really, really, really loving comic books, is I love the dual nature of the characters in the comic books, because I related to them, because I felt like, I was this one person in school and with these people, but I was this other person in my head and who I was kind of at home and when I could be by myself. And I remember high school for me was a very weird time, and I'm not going to get into it fully, but I'll just, say this part where, like, I was teased so much before this. I was bullied and teased, and I was by myself. And all of a sudden I start high school, and I look a certain way, and it was a very weird phenomenon for me, because all of a sudden girls are talking to me that never talked to me before, but they're talking to me like they're my friend, and they've always been my friend, like, oh, Brenda, you coming over to that party next week, or blah, 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 how you been, how was your summer? And I'm like, why are you talking to me? And they're acting like they've known me forever, and it was, but the weird thing is I kind of wanted to be accepted, but I didn't want to change who I was on the inside to be that way. So what I would do is I would still have, like, my backpack, and I would have the books that I really liked on the bottom, but then I also felt like being friends with girls in schools, like, was like a job, and I needed to be good at it. So what I did is, like, I hated, like, they would talk about soap operas and all this kind of stuff, and I don't want to watch any of that, but sometimes I would watch snippets of stuff, or my mom's soap opera or whatever, so I could kind of research what I was supposed to do and how I was supposed to act, and that was very, very difficult for me, because it didn't come naturally to me. But I thought it was like that for all the girls, and they just were better at it, and maybe because they hung out more together and they practiced, and they were just much better at it than me, especially my sister. She was really, really good at it, and I'll get into my theories about that later too in another video. But so high school was very weird for me. And the other thing that happened in high school that came out was a movie called Heathers, and there was a girl named Veronica, and she was Winona Ryder, and there were 3 other girls that were really popular in school, and they were all Heathers, and, like, they were all like this, and, like, that's how I thought it was. Like, even though all the girls didn't have the same name in high school, they were, like, the same. And I felt like I was this Veronica who, like, they accepted me into their fold, but I still was. It was like one of these things are not like the other. And she meets Christian Slater. His name was, like, James Dean, and, like, or was it? Yeah, it was James Dean. And he starts, like, killing everybody in the school, and, it's this whole thing, I think, where, she's at a crossroads, like, should she become like him, or should she become like them? And I like this story, because I felt the message that was at the end is that, like maybe there's always the world always gives you 2 choices, 3, whatever choices, but you can always find your own path. You can always be your own thing. That's also why recently I used to always hate when people would tell me the story of the scorpion and the frog, because it would be like, this is you know, like something would happen in your life and you would be like, why did this have to happen? And they would be like, you've heard the story of the scorpion and the frog. And if you guys don't know it, you know, the original story of the scorpion and the frog is the frog wants to cross the river. So, no, the scorpion wants to cross a river, and he sees a frog, and he goes up to the frog, and the frog is like, I'm not going to give you a ride because you're going to try to kill me. And the scorpion's like, why would I do that? Because I would die. And the frog's like, that makes logical sense. Jump on my back. And as they're going across the river, the scorpion stings the frog, and the frog goes, why? And the scorpion says, it's in my nature. And the story, I guess, is supposed to convey to everybody that you can't change another person's nature. And that makes total sense to me. But my thing was always like, but why, like, okay, but why does the story always have to unfold that way? Why can't it be different? So I decided to write my own version of the scorpion and the frog. And in my version, the scorpion, the frog is a girl, and I call her the foxy frog. And the scorpion comes up to the foxy frog and asks to cross the river. And she says, yes. Well, first she says no. She's like, you'll sting me. And the scorpion's like, why would I do that? We'll both die. And she thinks about it for a second, and she's like, And she runs off into the forest, and she comes back with some gooey stuff, and she tells the scorpion that he has to eat it. And the scorpion is kind of weary, but is like, well, the only way I can get across the river if I eat this stuff. And the scorpion does, and gets on the frog's back. And as they're going across the water, the scorpion's about to sting the frog, but the scorpion falls into a deep sleep. And the frog thinks to herself, should I just dump him in the water? And then she's like, no, I promised him he should go across, so I'm going to take him across. So she gets across the river, she jumps the scorpion on the bank, and she bounces a safe distance away. And when the scorpion wakes up, he's like, how? Why? And she says, it might be in your nature to sting and kill, but it's in the nature of the trickster hero to find another way. And she bounds away. And I felt like part of the reason I did that is because I used to love mythology when I was a little girl. And one of my favorite stories were always like the trickster hero stories, because not always one of the bad ones, but how they would sometimes find like a better way, like a different way. And that was always that always resonated with me. As did like the whole concept of like the superhero, because either the dual nature, or not necessarily following what other people do. And, even though like I didn't know how different I was than everybody. But the other thing that I felt, and I was going back to what I was saying about I've been reading a lot of AspieGirl, like saying that either they identify as male or androgynous, or some part, like, not, it doesn't happen with every AspieGirl or alien or girl with autism, however we're going to say it. But for me, the way it did is I always felt like I related way better to the guys. Girls never make sense to me. They still don't. I have a really hard time making friends in general, but especially with women. Because at least men are more direct, and their secret language only usually happens when it's like mixed company, or when they're trying to do whatever. I don't even know what's going on. But so inside my head, I've said that, I used to say this all the time, even before I knew this about myself, that I felt like on the outside I feel very, very feminine, and to the point where, like, sometimes, and I'm reading about this, and I think a lot of times girls that are on the autism scale sometimes feel asexual or identify more as being male. A lot of times when it comes to sex itself, it's not something that they don't even like. And I think it's a lot because we're in our head a lot, and I think our bodies are very confusing to us, and because our senses get overloaded a lot of times, things either feel very, very good to us or very, very bad. But the weird thing, and I think, and I'm not sure how this manifests for anyone else, but for me, when it came to sex, it's I either love it or I hate it, and I usually love it. I get very, very hypersexual, and I used to think that, again, was a product of my bisexuality. I mean, of my bipolar, but I'm now starting to understand that probably is also, that's actually more having, because it doesn't always happen when I'm manic, where I'll get hypersexual. And I realize part of the reason I get that way also, like I said, inside my head, I feel very much like a guy, like nerdy guy. Like, even the things that I like, I I have a sword collection, and I have comic book collection, and I collect sci-fi and fantasy books, and I don't watch any romance, or I don't understand why girls or anybody likes that. Everything I watch is like either action based or like I like some drama. Like if I feel like if it's like a study in the human condition, or like conveying like a like interesting an interesting message or about society, or like some kind of overarching theme, or whatever. But I mean, my favorite movie in the whole entire world is The Dark Knight, which I'll probably get into at another point, and I can pretty much say all the lines almost verbatim, especially the Joker lines. And actually, I started writing this parody of the movie with, because I also love Harley Quinn, with and I call it the Dom Knight and a Harley Quinn moment, and it's like the Joker, if the Joker was Harley Quinn, and Batman was actually the Joker, but with Batman-esque qualities, and he was more like a Dom. Like in the whole BDS thing, since that's become such a huge thing, and like I've never read 50 Shades of Grey, but I have read the story of O, and and like, and just me kind of making fun of all of that. But anyway, so I think for me the thing is that because I'm in my head all the time, like one of the very few times that I feel fully in my body is during sex, and the other thing is that the other time I feel like that is when I dance. Because when I was a kid, I was never good at any sports, especially team-related sports. And I never knew why that was. Anything that had, I thought, especially if it had like some kind, I always say, I don't like any team-related sport, especially if it involves a spherical type device, such as a ball or puck, because I'm horrible at it. I don't like watching it. I don't want to be part of it. Why would I want to watch something I'm not even good at? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And something else I found out people don't like. Oh, I don't even know if I haven't gone into all the differences that I think compared to like Earthlings and us aliens. Is that I didn't understand that why people get angry with me. For a couple of things. One, because it's getting to 30 minutes, and then hopefully each of my video after this, I want to have a different volume, and we'll have a theme, so I'm not just like all over the place like I am in this one. I know. What I found out people don't like is, so people will tell me they like something, like say I don't like country music because it's like nails on a chalkboard to me, and it like goes right through me. I can't. Sometimes if I'm at a restaurant and they're playing it, I'll ask them to shut it off, which I realize now is probably not appropriate. The other thing is, if someone tells me they like country music or plays it, I kind of flip out, and I'm like, I hate, it's anathema to my soul, and blah blah blah. And people get really upset with me. And now I learned, and no one would ever tell me before why that was bad to say that. Or if someone says they like sports and stuff, or like football, I start to go off on like why I don't like it and why blah blah blah, and people get upset and get into these arguments with me, and I never understood what I was doing. Because if I tell someone I like something, if I have like like I don't know, like whatever, like when I was a kid, like Dragonlance, and people like I thought that was stupid, I'd be like, all right, let's talk about like another interesting topic. I never got upset about it, but I realize now that when you tell us that Earthlings or Terrans, like things that they associate with their identity, like if you say that you don't like a thing that they identify as part of who they are, then you're basically saying you don't like them. So like if they tell you something, if they're sharing something that they like, they're not sharing it to see if you're interested and to find a common interest, or like what, or maybe they are, but like basically denigrating like something that they like and they hold dear, then you're basically saying you don't like them as a person. Now, since I have so many weird likes and everything like that, and I don't know, I don't see that as being like, I don't feel like that is my identity. And that's something I'll get into in another video too. I see that as just like the things that I like, and they make up parts of who I am. But if you don't like them, and I know most people don't, then I'm totally fine with that. And it used to bother me when people get upset, and since no one seemed to be able to explain it to me until I read this book by Ian Ford, who is now Star Ford, explaining the author's kind of observations of Earthlings, and it's like a field guide to Earthlings. Explained that there are certain social constructs or certain things that people identify as part of their like id or their ego, and when you insult things that they associate with themselves, then you're basic. So if you say someone's like Christian and you say like I don't like Christianity, then you are basically saying that part of your through association you're saying you don't like them. If someone says they're Republican and you say you're Democrat, that's why it used to bother me. My parents are very, very big Republicans. Oh, it's getting to 30 minutes and this might cut me off, so I'm gonna stop it now, but I just want to finish that one thought. My parents are Republicans, and they get, as soon as people say they're Democrats, like my parents stop talking to them, and I never understood why. Like they still might have valid points, you know. Anyway, so this is my introductory. I'm sorry, it was a little bit all over the place. Hopefully, I'll be able to stick to themes in my upcoming volumes. So this will be, I'll call these the Chronicle of a Lost Girl and AspieGirl, and then each volume and what the theme will be, overarching theme. And hopefully I'll be able to stick to the topic. All right, so thank you, world. I hope you enjoy my videos. Bye.